good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on when you might actually be watching this video. Um, Today, it shouldn't be, I guess, a big surprise. I'm going to talk about death. Um, I promised I was going to do that a couple of weeks ago, but apparently the universe felt like I shouldn't do that until I had a little more experience with death. And as I think a lot of you know, my father passed away a week ago today. And actually, my uncle, my mother's brother, also passed away on Thursday. So it's been a week. And the first thing that I want to say is thank you to my tribe, all of you. Whether you're close friends, family members, acquaintances, Facebook friends that I've never met, whoever you are, all of the outpouring of love and support and kindness and great thoughts and good vibes and love and light and everything that you've been sending, not only my way, but the way of my mother, my brother, our kids, daddy's grandchildren, and friends. It's been a beautiful thing. And I apologize to anyone that I haven't been able to personally get back to. I'm working on that. So here goes death. First of all, obviously we all die. I guess I don't even have to say that, right? But it's something that we don't like to talk about very much. And I'm going to be able to use a couple of examples from my most recent experience, right? So when my father was in the hospital this last time for 3 weeks, now looking back, I know some things I didn't know before. For instance, he had started to have a spiky fever that no one could explain and for which there was no infection. Apparently that's a sign that the body is beginning to transition and downshift toward the end. There were other things too. And nobody said, hey, have y'all thought about hospice? Or maybe we're looking at an end, the beginning of the end here. Let's talk about all the options. Now, I understand that. I'm not upset with anyone at the hospital. Everybody was doing the best that they could. And there are reasons, I believe, that they didn't say that, and they're valid. But I do also think that because so much of the time this isn't part of the conversation, that a lot of times the transition between this life and whatever you believe comes next, and we'll talk about that, ends up being less than the best that it could, because we either try to fight till the end, we don't see that the end's coming, we don't know that the end is coming. I mean, obviously there are times when we don't know. It's a car crash, it's a sudden illness, a stroke like my father had, but that did not kill him. A heart attack, whatever. Things can happen, but most of us are going to go when we're older, and there's going to be some choices that we could and that our families could make. And we don't do that because I think so much of the time now we've removed death from our lives. It's this inevitable thing that we don't talk about and that we don't prepare for and we don't plan for and we don't talk to our family members. And one of the things that I'm really grateful about in the past week is that not only have I now had that conversation with my mother, but I've had that conversation with my kids too. And we've had a real discussion about what I would want and what I wouldn't want and how I would want things to go. And I hope that I'm lucky enough to have that chance to choose. It wasn't until we said, hey, maybe we need to bring him home and think about not doing anything to prolong his life anymore. Maybe things are starting to move in that direction. Let's talk about making him as comfortable as possible in whatever time he has left. And then also the whole situation with COVID is part of it too, right? Because we were thinking about putting him in a skilled nursing facility, thinking that he was going to be doing rehab and learning to swallow again and being able to come back home. But in that meantime, we weren't going to see him, right? Because of the restrictions around nursing homes with COVID, with the virus right now. So that was part of what was making it very difficult. Anyway, it wasn't until we were about to move him to Lambeth that we finally broached the idea of either palliative care or hospice care. And the hospital moved very quickly when we mentioned that. Apparently everybody was sort of thinking, oh, that would be a good idea, but they were afraid to say something. And again, I'm not blaming anybody. They did the best they could with the knowledge they had at the time they had it. But I was grateful at how quickly they moved once we said something, and reviewed documents and so on and so forth. Reviewed the medical chart, talked to the doctors, came and talked to us about what we were thinking about Dad's condition, about what was happening. And it was recommended immediately that instead of palliative care, actually what we were talking about was hospice. And that turned out to be quite right. So the choice was made to bring him home because we didn't want him to be alone in the last few days of his life, or weeks, or whatever it was going to be at that point. And I know also I'm very grateful that we were able to make that choice, because I know so many people these days are not. And I have firsthand accounts of so many people who have not been able to be with their loved ones when they've passed. And that would be heart-wrenching. And my heart goes out to those of you who've had that experience ever, and particularly who have had to deal with that recently, or who may be dealing with it now. I've been through all of it because Daddy had COVID and we couldn't go see him when he was in the hospital in April. So, I mean, I can't ever know what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes, but I have some experience with it myself. Anyway, the transition out of our earthly, fleshy tents, as Father Bird at St. Martin's used to call them, our fleshy tents, can be a much easier thing if we choose for it to be. And the good news, and the thing that I'm really sure of, and I'm also going to use the first law of thermodynamics to talk about this too. I promise there is going to be some science in this. I have absolute faith that no matter what happens to our fleshy tent, okay, that there is a part of us that moves on to something else. And again, I leave it up to you to what you think that something else is, okay? The first law of thermodynamics says that energy can neither be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed, okay? Now, whatever you believe about a soul, an energetic imprint, whatever you might want to call an energetic being, whatever it is that you might want to call that part of us that's hard to explain, that part of us that makes us unique, that vibration that we have that changes a room when you walk in. And you know what I'm talking about, right? There are people who have a really strong energetic imprint, if you want to call it that, right? They have and you could call it a strong personality. However you want to label it. And they walk into a room and the room changes. And it could change for the better or it could change for the worse, right? There's some people walk in and you think, oh, wow, that is some down energy. Or someone can walk into a room, and if I may be so bold as to say this, my father was one of those people who could walk into a room and change it for the better. That he had that kind of really positive energy. He always had a positive outlook, and he always had a positive charge about him. And that was one of the reasons I think that he was able to do so many of the things that he was able to do, and that and that so many people were so touched by him, all different people from all different walks of life, which has been one of the gratifying things to learn more about since he moved on. But you know what I'm talking about, right? There's that energetic thing. There's something, that je ne sais quoi that someone has when they walk in a room, and the energy changes. Or there's someone that you meet, and some people you meet them the first time and you just know, you're like, wow, I really want to get to know that person better. There's something about them that's just really, that draws me to them. You can call it a light, they have a presence, they have whatever, they have charisma, whatever it is. That thing, to me, in my understanding, is the same thing as the soul, as the anima, as the as the vibration, the unique vibration that each one of us have. I mean, you can use whatever phrase you want or terminology you want to describe that unique thing that every person has. And if you've known someone, particularly if you've loved someone and been in close contact with someone, when they move on, you still know what it felt like to be around them, right? You can remember, if any of you have lost someone, lost someone, that's a terrible term. If any of you have had someone in your life who has transitioned, who is no longer here in their fleshy tent, right? Who's no longer in their human body, I imagine you know what it's like to think of that person and invoke their energy. Like, you can feel what it was like to be around them, right? You can think of a situation, or you can be in a situation, you could know exactly what they would say, right? And you might even hear it in your head, right? So that's the kind of thing that's left behind, right? That's an energetic, you can access that about another person. You can even access it about animals. I mean, I can do it with animals that I had in the past. I can think of my dog that I had as a child, Justice, the basset hound, and I can remember what it felt like to be in her presence, right? I can remember what it was like to be around her, or my dog, my basset hound Birdie. I can remember what it was like to be around him. He had a unique energy. That is very different from the dog that I have now. And when my dog's not with me, I can still feel, like, if I think of him, I can feel his energy. I feel him. And it's the same is true of people who have left this realm and moved on to the next. So going back to the first law of thermodynamics, this idea that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, it can only be transformed, right? So then that plays directly into this idea that when this fleshy body is done, when it doesn't work anymore, when it stops working, right? Something else moves on. Something leaves that body and goes somewhere else. Now, whether you think that's to heaven, to purgatory, to hell, to source, to rejoining the energetic vibration of the universe, to walking around here and talking to you, it doesn't matter to me what you think happens, right? I think the most important piece is, and the takeaway for me, is that there is a part of us that cannot die, that cannot be killed, that lives on after us. And it doesn't just live on in the hearts and memories of those who cared about us, but it actually lives on. Now, whether it gets reincarnated or, like I said, goes to purgatory or wherever, again, I'm not going to dictate to you what you believe. You don't even have to agree with me or believe what I'm saying now. I'm really putting this out for your consideration, right? And the other interesting experience that I had this week was with my Uncle Peter. We found out on Wednesday that he had put himself in hospice on Tuesday. He had simply decided on Monday, I'm not going to doctors anymore. He had had one doctor's appointment. He had a couple of other doctor's appointments, and he just decided, I'm done with doctors. I'm 91. I've had a good run. I'm grateful for a great life, and I'm finished. So he signed himself into hospice on Tuesday, stopped eating and drinking. We found out about this on Wednesday. This past Wednesday. And Mom called me, and I said, great, pack a bag. We're going to Fairhope, because that's where Peter was, and where his body was. So we got in the car, and we drove to Fairhope. And we got there that night, and we went straight to his house, and we sat with him for a couple of hours. And he had some trouble hearing, but he said trouble hearing for a while. That wasn't new. But he point blank told us just what I said. I'm 91. I've had a great run. I've had a great life. I've had a great family. Been very blessed. Had a great house. My body's not really working anymore. I can't do the stuff I want to do. I'm done. I'm checking out. I'm finished. Love you. And I made a joke with him, because he actually was a lifelong yogi. He actually studied with Sivananda in the 50s, I think. I mean, Peter was great. Peter was a really interesting character, and he lived a very, very full life. So I joked with him, and I said, well, Peter, you really are going out like a true yogi, aren't you? You've just decided you're done, and you're flipping the switch off. And he laughed. And he said, I guess if you want to look at it that way, yeah, I've just decided I'm done. And he was. So we went and spent the night at the hotel. We came back the next morning. We had some more time with him. Mom sat with him for a while. I sat with him for a while. We sat together with him. And Mom asked him if he wanted last rites, and he did. So she called the priest of the church that he'd been going to, and they arranged last rites. And we were hoping to be there for last rites, but we needed to get back to take care of some business with my brother here in New Orleans, so we had to leave. So we left about 11:30, and unfortunately the priest hadn't been able to get there yet, but Mom was in contact with him trying to make sure, because she felt like Peter wasn't going to be around that much longer, and he did want last rites. So we got word while we were in the car that the priest had been there and that they had performed last rites. And about 2 hours later, we got a call from the woman who was with him to say that he had moved on. And he did it exactly the way he wanted to. And I can also say that about my father. At least there was a choice at the very end. Daddy, as all of you know, was a fighter. And he fought for the last 5 years to walk again and to drive again and to, at the very least, do all the stuff that he still did, which he did. He still chaired charity boards, and he was still at the World War II Museum, still with St. Thomas Clinics, amongst others, the Ball Foundation. He was still doing lots of stuff, and he was not slowing down any more than he absolutely had to, mostly because the people around him couldn't keep up with him as much. But at the end, I think when he went, he chose to go when he went, because my brother had been with him all weekend and had just returned home. My kids had been there that afternoon. James had been reading Shakespeare to him. Vivian had fed him ice cream the day before when she was there. And about 9 o'clock, my brother had texted me that he'd gotten home and he was checking in to see how things were. I walked out of the room to the back of the condo to talk to him. Oh, you see, I've got my thunder friend is back again. And when I got back from checking in with Lee, my mom said, I think he's going. He's starting to stop breathing and then start again. And he waited for me, I think, to be there as much with Mom as anything else. And about 5 minutes after I got back to the room and sat down on the other side of the bed and held his hand, he took his last breath. And it was immensely peaceful. And it was just me and Mom with him. My kids had been there, but they had left about an hour before he passed. And I think he timed it just the way he wanted to, you know. He'd seen everybody that he knew he could see. Unfortunately, the virus kept him from seeing maybe as many friends as would have been his choice. And it has certainly kept us from doing a proper celebration of his life, which we probably would have done yesterday or tomorrow if it wasn't for coronavirus. But we're going to put off for quite some time because we want to be able to do things the way that he would want them done, and that includes a few more people than we'd be able to have right now. Daddy liked a good party. So anyway, that's what I have for you today, and that's to say that we don't die. We don't. And I guess if there's one thing that I could say, I don't think we have anything to be scared about. There's no reason not to talk about it. It is part of life. It's just a transition. And I'm sad. I miss my father. I miss his physical presence. But I can also say, and I know y'all are going to think I'm a little weird, but I can say he's been around. As we've been making decisions about what to do with his flesh, his remaining body, we've been guided by things have happened that have guided him, and I'll be happy to tell people that story at some point in the future. And then also one of the things that happened was that I will tell you was when Mom and I were driving to Fairhope on Wednesday evening, and I decided to turn on a little music, and I was trying to come up with something that wouldn't be too offensive to my mother. So I put on James Taylor. I've always been a huge James Taylor fan, and I let it shuffle. I let my phone decide what song was going to come on first. And the song that came on first was Shower the People, right? So we were listening to it, and my mom started to cry a little bit, and I was crying a little bit. And then at the very end of the song, I had never noticed it before, and it may not be on all the versions, but it's on the version that I have from one of the greatest hits albums. Almost at the very end of the song, just under the main lyrics, he says, "Into every life, a little rain must fall." And that was one of my dad's favorite phrases. I can remember being completely irritated by my father so many times when I was frustrated or unhappy about a situation, or I was having some difficulty, and Daddy would just say, into every life, a little rain must fall. Because that's all he ever thought of it. Any problem, as far as he was concerned, it's just a little rainstorm. Take a little shelter for a little while or walk in it, whatever, but it's just rain. It's going to go away. And in this case, it also had another meaning, right? It had a meaning that we get showered with love, right? And he was showering us with a little bit of love, I felt like. And my mom heard it too. We both looked at each other. We're like, oh my God, that's so funny. And I had never heard that in that song before. Into every life, a little rain must fall. And I love that. So thank you guys for putting up with me again. Thank you, Daddy, for helping with this message. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please, either direct message me or leave a comment after the video. Big blessings and love to all of you. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for everything. Love you. Bye.